So, non-duality. Not two, only one. Oneness. There is only oneness. There is no separation. But goodness me, there seems to be separation. There seems to be this and that, rather than just this. So what's going on? Well, the suggestion from here is that when we are born, we can't speak about this without personalising it with the language we use, because that's how language works. So we could say that when we are born into oneness. In other words, the newborn baby has no sense of self. That's another way of putting it. For the newborn baby, there is simply what is, what's happening. Sensation, we could say. Perception and sensation and feeling. But it doesn't belong to anybody. But as time goes by, and this bizarre thing, for now I'll call consciousness, and we can come back and argue about what that word means later if we want to, or even if it particularly has much of a meaning. But for now, let's say, as time goes by and consciousness develops, what happens is that there is, as it were, a kind of a separating out of me from this. So we could say, to start with, there's just this, there's no me, there is just what's happening. Sensations, and then gradually the sense of me begins to appear and begins to separate from it, and then this becomes I or me inside this. And that's duality, that's separation. It's the sense that I exist inside something else called the world, and I move around inside that much larger entity. And as I move around inside it, I find myself bumping up against other apparent separate entities that move around inside it, who are also called people, or other beings. So we could say that the wonderful adventure of my life, the wonderful story, the autobiography of, Richard or Lucas, whoever. It's not there at the beginning, it emerges. And as it emerges, then there's the realization that there are these other entities that can be enjoyed, but also have to be handled in a way. Other entities that may be pleasurable to me, but may also be highly problematic to me, as we well know. And so then the great adventure has started, as I say, of my life, my story, my narrative, my life, with a beginning and a middle and an end, which unfolds through time. I'm born, and at some point in the future I will be older, and then I'll die. And it unfolds through space. I'm born in Sardinia, and then I decide when I'm 20 to go to study history in Ankara or something like that. So time and space come into being, and I move through it. And that's duality, that's separation. And that's what you might say that most of us just recognise as ordinary life, or the nature of life, or the nature of reality. And in that we might make up all sorts of stories to give that reality meaning. So we might, for example, all the world's religions, all the world's mythologies, all the world's religions make up these wonderful stories to give us some kind of story, the hope of extending our life beyond death, for example, and things like that, And we might notice that, by and large, this isn't 100% true, but it's mostly true that all of those stories we make up, all the world religions, all the mythologies and so on, that we make up to give our lives meanings, are also dualistic. They represent the illusion in which we live, that I am separate from everything. So we make up God or gods, whom we are separate from, but whom we can worship and be saved by or be cursed by. And on and on and on it goes. And the suggestion here is just a really, really simple one, that at some point in apparent time, that can just collapse. Everything that I've talked about that is developed once the baby is more than a few months old, all of that, our biography, our life story, the fact that I am a me, I am separate, I'm an individual, I'm a person, I have a life story, and I have this precious thing particularly called free will, through which I can create my own story. Maybe I have destiny, who knows, that all of that can simply collapse. And it can be recognised that all of that is an illusion. All of it is simply a story. And that in reality, well, that collapse can reveal all sorts of things, but the core thing that it reveals is that there is no me in here and the world out there. There is just this, and by this, all that's meant by that is whatever is presenting, whatever is arising, whatever phenomena are happening, whether they're external phenomena, somebody just moved over there, external phenomena, internal phenomena, a sensation of it not being quite warm enough in this room, whatever, doesn't matter. All of that can just be revealed to belong to no one. Belong to no one, that's the absolute core of what we're talking about. The core sense that everything that happens for me and to me is just an illusion. And by illusion, that word is sometimes taken to mean something which simply doesn't exist. It's not that, because that sense of separation, sure as hell, does exist. But it's an illusion, as in it is not what it appears to be. It is something other than what it appears to be. And we could maybe sum up that illusion by saying what it appears to be is very, very solid. It's kind of the ultimate solidity. I live in this. This is me, and everything else is separate from me. You could say that is the core and the most solid apparent reality that I live with, and then that collapses. The absolute core of what I assume to be my being, so much that I probably, or I may never have even thought of it, may never have ever questioned it, that can just collapse. And then, instead of me in this, it can be seen that there is just this, because me doesn't exist. It might exist temporarily as a sensation, as a thought, a set of beliefs, all of those things, but it isn't ultimately real. And then, well, then what? I could say, well, so what? Then what? Well, then whatever happens. But probably, it's quite likely there'll be some, I don't know why I've never said this before, I don't know why this word suddenly popped into my head. It's quite likely there'll probably be some blowback from that, to say the very least. The recognition, that this person who thought they had a life that they could create and were to some extent in control of, that none of that actually exists. The person doesn't exist, the person collapses, and therefore everything about their story collapses. So one of the things that's often commented on is that when this is seen, there's a seeing through time. For example, there's a seeing through time. There's a seeing that the past, and let's stick to the autobiographical paths of the person to make it simple. There's a seeing that the past is just a story. It has no substance to it. And the future is also just a story. It has no substance to it. And this is summed up in that non-dual mantra that is said over and over again: there is just this. There is just this. There's nothing else. Part of what that's pointing to is there's nothing, part of what it's pointing to is there's nothing before this and there's nothing after this. There's just this. So there are no places from which people came here today. And there may be a thought, I left home at 9 o'clock this morning in my car, on a bicycle, or in a train, or perhaps on a camel, who knows, but it's just a thought. You know.
It's just what?
It's just a thought. That's just a thought. So there is just this, no past, no future, just this. And what I often say is that in one way, that can sound absurd, because what I'm going to refer to as we characters, us characters, we sit here with the knowledge of a personal history, and that even for those of us with the worst possible memories, that personal history will probably stretch back at least to 8 o'clock this morning. And we also sit here with the kind of, expectation of a future to come. And again, however challenged we might be intellectually, probably that is going to extend to at least 6 o'clock this evening. So we live in a story of time, we could say. I came here from somewhere else, leaving at 9 o'clock this morning. I expect to return there at 6 o'clock tonight. That whole sentence is kind of, we could say it's false. We could just say, if we're a little bit kinder to ourselves, we could say it's an illusion. It's what's sometimes called the divine illusion. That we live in this wonderful thing called time, and we live in this wonderful thing called space. So there are other places, and there are other times. No, they're not. No, there's not. It's easier in a way to absorb that sentence with time, because somehow the past, the person thinks the past is somehow real, the future somehow will be real, but not now. So it's not quite so challenging, but it's pretty challenging to be told that the future and the past are really just a story arising in this. And then space, it's even more of a challenge. That there is just this, there is nothing outside this. And it doesn't matter, in a way, how much or how little of a challenge it is, because understanding this intellectually isn't the point. Understanding this intellectually is probably impossible anyway, but it's also not the point. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's simply an assertion from here that can be accepted or rejected or half accepted or half rejected. Believe me, it really doesn't matter which. It's just the assertion from here that this is the entirety of existence. This, bang, it's gone. Or this, and bang, it's gone. And just here, so just here, just this, just now, and even that word now is misleading. When I'm in a poetic mood, which sometimes falls upon me when I sit in this seat, I refer to this as the sliver of light in the darkness. There's nothing and nothing and nothing and nothing. But between those nothings, there's this sliver of light. That's what this is. This is the sliver of light between non-existence and non-existence. And somehow out of that is created this wonderful illusion of continuity, of a life that is being lived. And the sense, until it collapses, that there is someone in that living the life who has this magical ability called free will and choice. And virtually, well, I think I'll take the word virtually out of it. If somebody can catch me out on this, they can. I'll just take the risk. All the world's religions, all the world's spiritual paths, even the ones that claim to be non-dual, if they're actually representing a spiritual paths, they all revolve around this divine illusion that there is someone here who has a life and they can do something about that life. And what's more, they'd better damn well do something about that life as well, because otherwise they're not being a good person. No, that all just collapses. And then this is not a, well, this is, I want to say, this is not a poetic description, I mean this literally, and then you might come back and you say, well, it didn't sound very poetic anyway, Richard, so why even bother to say that? But I'm going to assert, you know, this is not metaphor, you know, that what is seen is that this is silent, so it's silence, and it's empty, and so it's emptiness. It's still, so it's stillness, and out of that, movement and sound arise, and they are the same, they are no different. So the assertion from here is that sound is silence making sound, and movement is stillness moving. And this isn't an attempt, as I've said, this isn't an attempt at fanciful poetic language, it's an attempt to describe literally what's seen if the person drops away.
Big if. It's a big if. If a person drops away.
If or when the person drops away. Yeah. And at this point, I don't know why, and perhaps it's because I'm a man of particular lack of imagination. I always reach for Piccadilly Circus on a Saturday afternoon. I don't know why. One day I'll reach for somewhere else. So what I'm asserting is quite literally, you know, is that if you stand in Piccadilly Circus on, you know, a lovely hot summer's afternoon with the tourists whirling around you, the traffic whirling around you, the double-decker buses in all their red glory, the taxis charging up and down. That's about 3 miles an hour because it's Piccadilly Circus. But Piccadilly Circus is totally still, totally silent, totally empty. And all of that rushing around and noise and busyness and movement is stillness and is silence. It's just stillness and silence making movements and sound. And it's a still and a silent. One of the reasons, I mean, this doesn't have to happen, but it generally does. There's a very strong chance this will happen, that if this is seen, what I'm talking about, or even if we just become entranced by it, we're caught by it, we're caught by the tiger of non-duality, as Ramana Maharshi said, even if that happens and there's a fascination with this, and then this is seen, then all the stories that we've absorbed about holy places and spiritual places, special holy and spiritual places, just become ridiculous. Because everywhere is seen to be equally holy, equally spiritual, equally special, equally empty, equally ordinary. So I usually, just as a sort of slight illustration, I remember years and years ago when I was in my spiritual seeking days, somebody told me a story about a temple in a mountain in Japan, where a Buddhist temple, where it was claimed that there had been uninterrupted chanting for 800 years by Buddhist monks. Obviously not the same group of Buddhist monks, 800 years, they've been replaced over and over again. But nevertheless, the assertion was there'd never been a moment in that 800 years where Buddhist chanting had not gone on. And because I was a person of a particularly spiritually romantic nature, I thought, wow, God, that just sounds so amazing. God, the stillness and the silence and the reverberations of energy in that place must be absolutely amazing. Stories like that just totally collapse. Everywhere is like that. Everywhere is like that. Mm-hmm. The reason that they're not seen like that is because the person gets in the way.
And do you not, just from your experience, I'm curious, go back to fascination of a place ever?
Not in that sense, no.
So it's just like a realization that you carry with you?
Yes, you could say that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it's relevant, but at this point I want to quote something from Tony. This ruins your life. This ruins your life.
Okay.
And I gloss that, I add to that, well, it ruins what you thought was your life. So if your life was filled with the wonderful excitement of going to exotic temples and basking in the holy presence of aged Buddhist monks and listening to those Tibetan gongs that have been struck like this for 300 years, well, tough, because it's quite likely that that will all just collapse. But then on the other hand, instead of going to all that trouble, which is expensive and you've got to pack, you know, your diarrhea pills and eat brown rice and who knows what or whatever, you could just go down to your local park and watch the squirrels instead, and it will be just as fascinating. So we're back to, this is both a curse and a blessing. It's a curse because it ruins so much that the person found fun, but it's a blessing because it then turns out that
Fun is everywhere.
actually fun is just, you know, the leaves blowing along the gravel when in the wind. Yeah. So things tend to get much simpler. Yeah.
It's another way of what you're describing, Richard, the kind of movement of the background becoming the foreground, as it were. So the fascination isn't with the content any longer, it's with what's behind everything, as it were.
Yeah.
And there's still kind of simplicity of that.
Yeah, I don't know if this is what you mean or not, but also, of course, because as long as the I is there going me, it's the I that's in the foreground.
Yeah.
So in a way, everything is in the background.
Yeah.
So everything is kind of pallid.
Yeah.
So this can be part of the shock when the I drops. It's just the recognition, you know, the fascination of the simplest possible thing.
Mm.
You know, it might be the feeling of the fabric of an armchair. Might be the convolution, you know. Yeah.
Mm.
Because the me isn't clamouring for attention.
Yeah, and that collapse that you're talking about, the me as a experience of separateness, is it the separateness that goes, but the me still remains in the sense of, but it's seen as being a me that includes absolutely everything, or is everything?
No, I would say that what remains, unless there's physical death, is a character. So the kind of the, you know, the three-dimensionality, the apparent three-dimensionality, four-dimensionality because it lives in time, of the me collapses, and then what's left is a character. I mean, different speakers, different writers reach for different metaphors for this, or different words this character will do. Divine puppet, I like that one. You know, what's left is the divine puppet. Because a puppet has no personal will, because there is no person. Yeah. And I've forgotten, because one of the things that you can almost guarantee but not quite guarantee is that this also fucks your memory really badly. I've forgotten where you actually started with that.
Yeah, it's in a way, what I'm asking about is that movement into everything being included. You know, it is everything. It is everything.
Because when the I collapses,
Yeah.
that's all that's left.
That's
is
all that's
everything.
left, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, there isn't an inclusion, because that still suggests that there's a separation of some
Yeah.
kind, isn't there? Yeah, but
Yeah.
there is something about that, you know.
Nothing is excluded, so there's no inclusion or
Absolutely,
exclusion. It's
yeah.
just, again, it's just what is.
It's just what
it's
is.
arising.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean that the mind, that the mind which doesn't exist, so in other words, the thought stream, doesn't mean that the thought stream might not still come up with exclusive thoughts of exclusivity. That might still happen,
Mm.
but that's not what's seen.
And there's no longer the identification with that's me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But all sorts of things which we might normally associate with me may continue.
Mm.
Preferences of all kinds.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
And
you become.
some of the most toxic spiritual paths come from is the suggestion that is not the case, and that somehow I have to arise above
Yeah.
all what is regarded then as, you know, likes and dislikes because they're personal. And you get these toxic teachings in many places, you know, and they cause quite a lot of suffering. Yeah. So anything can still arise, likes, dislikes, political leanings, preferences, anything, you know. It's just seeing that they're not arising for someone.
Yeah.
So you are aware of a script. So what you're running now is a script.
I'm not aware of, no, I'm not aware of a script.
But you mentioned the character. So
Yeah.
I'm using, you know, the kind of you know, a stage actor. Let's
Yeah.
say. So you are in the motion of an actor because you know the script and you're just acting out the script, but there is no you.
Yeah, I don't really relate to that. No, I can't really relate to that because it sounds like it almost sounds like, you know, there's certain kinds of spiritual exercises revolving around the idea of detachment, and this has got nothing to do with that. To me, I mean, I may be wrong, but to me that description sounds more like sort of detachment, where somehow I stand outside myself and I watch myself, so there's now two of me, which is not very non-dualistic, because I, you know, just gone on from one person, which is actually dualistic enough to two people, one watching the other.
So can you explain the character then?
Can I explain the
what do
character?
you mean by-
what do I mean by
Yes.
the character? What I mean by the character is everything that the person, right, let's go back to the person, the one that feels himself to be a person, everything that the person manifests, everything they manifest, like in terms of their behaviour, their interactions with other people, their so-called inner life, their thought stream, their feeling stream and so forth, right, all of that, it all belongs to this kind of very, very solid, you know, I live into space and time, and don't tell me I'm not real, you know. I mean, I'll prove you, I'll pop you on the nose or something like that to prove that I am real. So all of that, you know, when that final thing that I've just referred to, the sense that it all belongs to me, collapses, then the character is what's left. So the character is just those characteristics.
Dictated by biology and genes, is
But
it?
who knows? That's a nice story. You know, I mean, I love those stories. You know, I think evolution's wonderful and so forth. And they were, what? Hey, what? But you just said that time doesn't exist. Yes, but if you want an explanation of certain things, if you want an explanation, then have a good explanation rather than a bad one. So, whatever it was you just said, yes, biology, genes, life experience, da-da-da-da-da, all of that, yeah, whatever. I mean, again, that is also a story, and it doesn't matter. The fact is that, you know, the character behaves in this way or this way. Yeah. And we sit in this room with this wonderful, don't know, dozens, is it, or hundreds of books, dozens probably on those bookcases, all seeking to explain through different psychological theories why the character takes this form or why it takes that form. You know, who knows? But in a way it all collapses and becomes irrelevant. In a way it all collapses and becomes irrelevant when this is seen through, because don't forget, one of the things I've said, one of the very central things, is that the reality of the past collapses.
Mm.
You know, now, my God, you know, we have all these books on psychotherapy here, written by many wonderful authors. All those psychotherapists out there practicing. The sense of the past collapsing, God, that's a tragedy. That's a catastrophe.
I wonder if what you're asking is what's your experience of the character? What is that like to have one foot in the formless or the what you're referring to when the person falls away, and what is your experience of walking through life?
Just ordinary.
I think that's a question we all kind of have, like as muggles, just kind of like what is it? How can you navigate?
How can you navigate life?
But you're not navigating it.
Mm.
You know, I'm not navigating life, neither are you actually.
Mm.
There may be a feeling there, I am navigating life. I have to make choices about my life, for example, but these are just thoughts and feelings. That's not what's actually happening.
But then you said that dislikes and likes remain.
I said what?
Likes or dislikes remain.
They may, yeah. There's no rules. They may change, they may remain. Yeah, because there's a character. Yeah. In other words, again, I think I've said this already, the suggestion or the idea that somehow, you know, when this is seen, now existence consists of floating gently on a cloud 3 or 4 feet above the muddy surface of the earth, having risen above really important likes and dislikes, like whether I like Marmite or not, for example, and political views, and you know, all of that. I'm sort of above all that. No, I mean, it's just a kind of fantastical spiritual story. It's not just a fantastical spiritual story, it's a fantastical spiritual story which causes a lot of suffering. As people, characters, try to become more spiritual. And I am going to fucking explode if somebody doesn't bring me my cup of morning coffee now, instantly. But I know that, oh my God, that's not a spiritual, that's not a sort of, you know, I'm here in this ashram, I shouldn't care about my morning cup of coffee. But I do. No, I mean, forget all that.
So I'm curious.
There's this phrase I throw in occasionally, it should be much better known than it is, I think, poisonous pedagogy. In other words, poisonous pedagogy. In other words, teaching things to people, teaching people stuff that's toxic. You know, and I would suggest that teaching anyone that any teaching of a should is probably toxic anyway, but teaching someone that they should be aspiring to an impossible ideal is a very toxic teaching. It's an example of poisonous pedagogy. Yeah.
So do you still feel anxious?
Sorry?
Anxious, nervous?
Anxiety might arise, nervousness might arise, anything's possible. Anything's possible. I mean, I won't labour it because I've sort of talked about this a lot before, but I mean, I make this distinction that, you know, some people make, because I think it's a useful one, between what can be called natural feelings and neurotic feelings.
Oh,
yeah. So anxiety is a neurotic feeling. As such, it's quite likely that anxiety will be felt less or not at all. However, instead of anxiety, fear or terror might be felt instead. Because fear and terror are natural feelings and anxiety is a neurotic feeling. Yeah.
In a way, what you're talking about then.
The same, by the way, goes for irritation and anger. Irritation might die, but anger might increase. One of the core differences between irritation and anger is time. In the story of time, anger tends to be done and over with. Irritation can go on for hours, weeks, months, even years.
So, in a way, what you're talking about is a state which is much more undefended, really, than
Yes, in a
Like-
way. In
in
a
the
way, I'm
place
not
of the-
talking about a state.
Yeah, but in terms of when the ego, the
Yeah.
apparent ego is up and running, is
Yeah.
the belief that actually I can defend against that, I can say no to that, and
Yeah.
I've got choice, apparent choice. And there's something about that collapse which leaves the person completely undefended to a certain
No,
degree.
I would say not, because to me that seems to be saying, I mean, unless I may have misunderstood, that to me that sounds like what is left, you know, is some, you know, is this non-person who is then very vulnerable and undefended. No, I wouldn't have said so. No, I would say that, you know, when an appropriate reaction is called for, it's more likely to happen because there isn't neurosis getting in the way. So, for example, if there was a need to defend against an attack, that would be more spontaneous, I would say. Yeah.
But there isn't a story of time and space in terms of that being called on or that being available. You know, I mean, what you're talking about there is a very spontaneous
Yes.
movement in the moment,
Yeah.
which, you know, no one's doing it, and in a way nothing's happening, it's just what is happening.
It's much more likely to
Right.
be spontaneous
Yeah,
and in the right
yeah,
moment. Yeah. But don't forget that in the appearance, you know, life goes on through this appearance of time.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, time is an illusion, which
Yeah.
does not mean, you know, as I said before, I mean, you know, time, you know, there is this, and as I've suggested already, in a way, although that's very challenging, it's also kind of bloody obvious that there is just this. But
Yeah.
it's also obvious that the character lives in a story which unfolds through time.
Mm.
Yeah.
So the vulnerability, to some extent, maybe is, you know, maybe it's just an initial experience, initial phase of that falling away.
It could, oh yeah, it could be.
And there being
Yeah.
a certain, it's almost like the guardrails come off
Yeah.
of experience. you
I'd
know?
say, and again, no rules whatsoever, but I'd say a tendency more openness rather than more
Okay.
vulnerability.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I'd
Okay.
say. You know, because the natural, God, it's difficult to language. I need to say the natural self here, which is fine, but it's a bit misleading as
Yeah.
we're talking about the collapse of the self. The
Yeah.
natural being that's left,
Yeah,
you know, may actually be much better at, I don't want to say defending itself, responding to,
being in alignment.
being in alignment, responding to,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you know, responding to something that needs to be kept at bay, let's say.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
This isn't, we're not remotely talking about kind of unlimited openness. Here I am, come and wound me, you know, it's not that at all.
So there is still a sense of protecting the shell.
What is needed is more likely rather than less likely to occur in an appropriate way. Again, I'm picking my words quite carefully because I'm not certain. You know, there is this kind of, you know, some of the stories you read or watch on YouTube now, you know, this sort of wonderful idea of the immaculate, idealised person who is now floating somewhat, hovering maybe anywhere between 3 and 30 feet above the surface of the earth. You know, behaving immaculately. I mean, it's a kind of spiritual fantasy which contributes quite a lot to the deep bank accounts of many gurus.
Can I
But
ask?
let me just say, that it's more likely when action is taken by no one. It's more likely that when no one takes action, it's more likely to be appropriate than when someone takes action. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm experiencing, I find it easier when I close my eyes. I can understand that I'm not, that that I'm not a separate being that sort of exists in my head or behind my eyes or something, and that everything that I'm hearing, everything that's happening is all happening in the same place, which is awareness. And so there's no distance between anything. So the sound of my voice right now is happening in the same place as the sensation in my leg, etc. I find it a little harder when I have my eyes open, because then I can see distance and perspective, and so I think it's like I'm touching that understanding of it, I think, and the kind of, when I can feel that everything is happening in the same place in awareness, I can understand the feeling that there's no time, or that this is it, it's all, this is it. And that is kind of coming and going for me.
Yeah, sure.
It's like I have to concentrate, and I have to really, really be with. It's like understanding a different model of reality. Basically, it's like unlearning subject object and learning all is happening in awareness. I think my question is something about, I would like to be experiencing that in a kind of abiding way, and I'm not. It's like I'm working at it.
Yeah. So what I'm talking about is simply the possibility of all of that collapsing.
Yes.
You know, so you cannot work at it. Well, you can work at it, but it's a waste of time. You cannot work at it. In a way, you will never see it. But when you collapses, then it's just seen. And then there's no working at it. I think if I felt myself to be a teacher of a slightly different disposition, I might say, well, working on it in this way, and the manuals over, I mean, that's just going to get in the way. But of course it's not. Nothing gets in the way. Nothing helps and nothing hinders. But when that collapses, then it's just there. Then it's just seen that there's no space, because here and there are the same. Because if awareness is everywhere, which it is, so when this collapses and awareness is seen to be everywhere, then there is no everywhere, because it's all the same.
So there's something about the you collapsing, the I, the me that's working at it and is understanding it, and is, how does that you collapse itself?
It can't.
It can't.
Because it's false.
Yeah.
It's an illusion, so it can't. But it's the most natural question in the world to answer, to ask.
So what?
And if I had a real answer to it, I would be a very, very, very wealthy man, I'm quite sure. And there are many, many people out there who will offer us false answers to that question. How do I make this happen? In a way, you know, the falsity, the obviousness of the falsity is in the question. How do I make it happen? I doesn't exist. How do I, the false self, make I, the false self, disappear? I mean, you know, hopefully the absurdity of that begins to sound quite loud. And it's probably there are many frustrating things about this conversation, this speaking, but that's probably the most frustrating. How do I, who does not exist, make the apparent I disappear?
Does that happen when you're doing a hobby like pottery or whatever it is,
In a way.
you lose yourself in whatever it is that you're doing at the time, or what is being done at the time, as they say?
In a way, and it's often used as a kind of reference point. I don't know how good a reference point it is, because of course, it's, in a way, we do forget ourselves, we do get lost in things. But boy, oh boy, as we know, you know, when we've finished making the model aeroplane or whatever it is, or baking the cake, we come back with a vengeance. So.
And you can lose yourself in a book when you're reading a book, can't you?
Or with music or whatever. But so in a way, it's kind of, you know, similar, but it's not that similar.
No.
Because that kind of losing ourselves, whether it's whatever it's in,
Because time vanishes, go on.
but it doesn't tend to be transformatory.
No.
It doesn't tend to transform the character, let's say, who then returns. Yeah.
Or like driving a car really fast, or like rock climbing, those things that kind of force you into the moment. I know you're talking about something like different, like gardening, but those activities,
Yes.
I've always thought,
Yeah.
not that I have a lot of experience with either, but I've always thought if it forces you into the moment,
Yeah.
I guess I'm a fan of motor racing, so the drivers always say, I love it because I can't think about anything else while I do it.
Yes.
I always think that could induce.
But this isn't about forcing me into the moment. It's about the me collapsing. So anything extreme like that, I mean, I don't know, bungee jumping, skydiving, anything that puts us into, I mean, people, of course, but it can kind of knock us out of our everyday sense of the world and blah, 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 blah. It obviously has a value. But in a strange way, it has a value, although it's knocking me out of my normal awareness of myself as a person. Nevertheless, the value that it has is to the person.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of analogous, but it's definitely not the same.
When you say
In a way, the clue that it's definitely not the same is that I can apparently do something about it. In other words, I can go and sign up for a bungee jump, or I can drive a motor car very fast, or whatever it is, and there's nothing that I can do about what we're talking about.
when you say awareness, do you say everything's arising in awareness?
No, I think no. I mean, aware. Awareness is a word that comes up in certain contexts. Consciousness. So
Right.
no, basically, I see them as unhelpful terms
Yeah,
and unnecessary.
yeah.
No.
It's
If we
more,
say, there's just this.
it's more so the end of an awareness or a separate knower
Yes.
or aware of, or
Yeah.
it's just this.
It's the end of the illusion of a separate awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that occur in awareness? Well, I have no idea what that
But
would be.
if it did occur in awareness, it wouldn't mean anything. Awareness wouldn't mean
No.
anything
No.
if it did, or
Yeah. This is happening, right? I mean, compare these two sentences. This is happening. This is happening in awareness. I don't know what the second one has added to the first,
Right.
other than huge amounts of confusion and hours of endless videos on YouTube about what
Yeah.
consciousness is.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think it was me that used that word. I think it was me that used the term awareness.
Yeah.
Well, I've used it as well today. I mean, there's lots of contexts in which it's a useful word to use, but there's no suggestion here that this arises in some magical effluvia called awareness, but that is what many, many people make YouTube videos about. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to find a way to say this is happening where this is also happening, where this is, because it's a different model of reality, isn't it? I think that's something that I'm in at the moment, is
And then out of that-
relearning what reality is.
Yeah, and then out of that, you get a lot more kind of, well, it's a bit harsh to say toxic teachings, but certainly unhelpful teachings. So now, I can have a whole teaching about how I can become aware of awareness itself. We don't have to look on YouTube very long before we'll find videos teaching us how to become aware of awareness itself. Lovely. Now, it's just this.
So
Does this arise in something called awareness? It can't be known.
We are very helpless, aren't we?
No, we're not, because there is no me.
Righty-ho.
This is not, honestly, I've said this already this afternoon, possibly twice, I can't remember. This is not positing the existence of a helpless person. This is not suggesting that there is a helpless person there, that there's a person there who was unable to do anything about their fate. It's not saying that at all, it's saying there is no person there. So how can there be a help? There's not a helpless person there, there's not a powerful person there, there's neither.
which can then be very empowering.
Do you want to say more about that?
Well, the flip side to being, kind of understanding that there is no person there to be, that is, what was the word you said? Helpless, can actually be empowering, because saying that you're helpless.
Well, for the character maybe
Yes,
in
for
the
the
story,
character.
but there is no one to be empowered. So there's no one who is empowered, there's no one who is powerless. There's just this. But yeah, as a narrative for a character,
Yeah.
it might.
So you might choosing to say that you're helpless is as less beneficial as choosing to say that you're, having the power or powerful.
Say that again. Say that again.
So I think what I'm trying to say is that you are, as the character, choosing to use the narrative of saying that you're helpless, but you might as well say that I'm choosing the narrative to say that I'm powerful.
But as a character,
As
all
a
of
character.
that is still just story,
Yes.
story,
Yeah.
story. There isn't really choice going on there.
We're debating about whether or not there's anything, the intention, can intention serve anything with awakening or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, there is
Which
no
is
one
always-
who has intentions,
Yeah.
but intentions may arise. Yeah.
So for you, when that collapse happened, it just felt like something that just happened.
Yes. Well, the mind might like to spin a story about it. Like, this happened because of my wonderful golden karma. Or, whatever. My many lifetimes of devoted prayer and meditation, whatever. The mind might like to. And if the mind does like to spin a story like that, you'll probably end up with a new religion. Yeah. Or it might just be sin. This is beyond thought, beyond reason. Yeah. Everything just spontaneously arises. Yeah.
Is there something about inviting that in, like some sense of a willingness to let go of one's sense of their story, their beliefs,
Yes, there may be, but again, if there is, that's just arising. There's no one who does it. So there may be a willingness to let go of my stories, my beliefs. Is that helpful or unhelpful? That can't be known. I would suggest that if that happens, whether it's helpful or not, it's probably more relaxing. And there's a quote I've got to throw in a minute I haven't put in yet. It's probably more relaxing, which is great. But again, there's no one who can choose to do that. Yeah. So the quote, which I usually throw in every time when it comes up, why is it great if it's more relaxing? A Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist, can't remember his name, in an introduction to a great holy Tibetan Buddhist work, said relaxation is the key to Buddhahood, here and now. It's lovely. It's a bit misleading, but it's lovely. This isn't like anything, again, it's not like anything, but if it was like anything, it might be like relaxation. Yeah. Well, that doesn't sound very exciting, does it? Well, it's not meant to sound exciting. It doesn't matter whether it's exciting. You want excitement, take drugs. Or go to an ashram halfway up the Himalayas. That would be exciting.
Can I ask Richard, can you speak, I'm sure you've mentioned it in your books and whatnot, but can you speak a bit about how it was for you? Like, were you like standing in front of the mirror brushing your teeth and all of a sudden the self just fell and what happened?
Platform 5, Charing Cross Station.
Okay.
I have written about it. Well, I mean, very briefly. I mean, it happens. I mean, there's no, this which does not happen can happen in 1,000 a million different ways, I'm sure, right? But quite often what can happen is that there's an initial awakening, which is just a bang, a flash, and it's gone. Which I think relates, to what we read or what we might have practiced in Zen, for example, a moment of satori, whatever. This is all a story, and it doesn't have to be like this, but it's common enough, right? So in this flash, the emptiness of everything seen, which means basically there seems to be two things, going back to the very beginning of this afternoon, there seems to be me and everything else, so that's two things. So the emptiness of everything is seen. In other words, the emptiness of everything out there and the emptiness of this. So if this is empty, it's the same as that, so it doesn't exist separately. You could say, the seeing in a flash that there is just what's happening and it's completely empty, and then it's gone. And it is likely then to begin in the story of time a process which might look like this, like very, very rapidly all sorts of really crap ideas and really crap stories that this had lived by up to then, including every religious story, every spiritual story might just collapse. That's certainly one thing. So what I say is that quite often, it's a little bit misleading, quite often that initial collapse can then be followed in the story of time by a huge increase in wisdom. It's not really an increase in wisdom, what it really is, it's a collapse in stupidity. So the one that's left may then seem immeasurably much wiser than they were 2 seconds before, because all this stupidity has fallen away. What do I mean by stupidity? It's a rather cruel word to use, but so what? The collapse of all these kind of stories that we tell ourselves to make sense of this, the religious stories, the spiritual stories, philosophical stories, scientific stories, any kind of story that supposedly makes sense of that, all collapses, all just seen as a... So often then there can be a period of restlessness, despair, desperate seeking still, because it feels like some amazing insight has been given and then snatched away again immediately. So desperate seeking to try to get back to that. And maybe the belief that that's it, that's complete, if only I could get back there to that emptiness. And then later on, here, as in many other cases, then there's another collapse where this is seen to be empty again, but also now it's seen to be full as well. Full of what? Full of unconditional love. And that really is the full stop at the end of seeking, because then it's seen that there is, whatever happens after that in the life, assuming the character doesn't die of shock at that moment, whatever life of the character, however that goes on after that, it's just known that there's nothing else to seek. Seeking dies at that point. If that's really seen, seeking dies at that point. Everything else may go on exactly the same, or it may be slightly or radically and drastically changed. Doesn't matter.
So you may have that initial epiphany, I want to call it.
Yeah, sure.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have seen everything and nothing. No,
if what's seen is emptiness, that is, it may be utterly transformatory, but it is definitely incomplete.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this does not just consist of emptiness.
The
clue to that is the fact that, look, there's something happening. It can't just consist of emptiness, because there's something happening, movement. Bottles of water are happening.
And when you spoke about unconditional love last month,
yeah,
and that contains everything.
Everything.
Yeah, and nothing at the same time.
Yes, yeah. Yes. The seeing of unconditional love is the seeing that this is both everything and nothing. They're the same. They are not different.
Mm-hmm.
The point about it containing everything, that's more to do with the mind of the character. I was just trying to get over the point that unconditional love is, I think as I may have already said earlier, is incredibly challenging. It doesn't matter as a concept, who cares about it as a concept, but we are here to talk about it, and we have to do that in concepts. It's not an incredibly challenging concept, it's an impossible concept for the mind of a person to get, because all people live in conditionality. So there's always something that I, the person, hates, if you think that's too strong, doesn't like, whatever. There's always something that I, as the person, excludes from love, but unconditional love doesn't exclude anything, even if it's the thing that I most hate. Unfortunately, I wish unconditional love was on my side in this and agreed with me, that I'm sorry that blah 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 is absolutely unacceptable and it's outside of it, but unconditional, so sorry mate, unconditional means unconditional. So it embraces everything, even if you really detest that thing. And that's the shock. Yeah.
That's very helpful, thank you.
Is it?
Yeah, it was actually.
Okay. Yeah.
What did you say, sorry?
No, it's helpful, that sort of
Yes.
explanation of your experience.
So on a, on the level of the character, whatever our, whatever our political hatreds might be, for example, whatever our angers towards people that might be carried over from the past, for example, or they're here in the present, or I can't stand, or whatever, it doesn't matter. It might even be, it could be as banal as I don't like rice pudding, or as huge as I am angry with God. Doesn't matter. That's all just unconditional love. Accepts it all.
Some teachers talk about awakening as being sort of a head, heart and gut kind of process. Is that something that you would agree with, or is that just another story?
It's another story. I mean, that might just be how, this isn't an experience, and yet in a way we have to say, well, for the character, they're going to talk about it as if it's an experience. There's no other way to talk about it. So maybe for some characters that's how it appears to be, yeah.
But
it's not a kind of,
But there's a sort of general kind of theme, isn't there, that the experience of awakening is a very somatic experience. It's a very energetic one. It isn't just a seeing with the mind.
This is an energetic shift.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
And does that happen in that, that process that you described, the initial kind of, seeing, and then almost like there's a percolation that has to happen
happens afterwards.
Yeah.
In the story of time.
Yeah.
It's like somehow that knocks out of us. So many. So many of our beliefs about the nature of reality, and somehow that makes sense. That space, it makes space for all this. Like I said, I think I've already said, it's like this sort of huge new wisdom, but it's not really anything added. It's just that a lot of stupidity has been taken away.
But the
We
process.
don't really get any. Well, it's not us anyway. There isn't really any more wisdom, but there's less stupidity.
But the process after that, for you, after Charing Cross, was that a very kind of somatic experience in your, from what you remember?
Well, the trouble with that word is that, let's call it an experience, that kind of flash, whatever.
No, I mean the process after that.
In the process after that, I would say no, that the process after that is, like I say, it's a process. I don't like this word download, but it's a convenient word. It's more like that. It's like, God, all this space has been created, all these stories have collapsed, and then suddenly there can be a great kind of downloading to the sounds of a buzzsaw of,
Sounds like quite a bit of downloading going on downstairs.
What is happening down there?
I don't know.
No. I'm sure it's, I don't know.
Sounds like an Osho meditation.
It may be.
Maybe something
Maybe
you haven't
it's
tried yet, Richard.
I don't think there is a. No, I don't know. They do run their own psychotherapy courses here, so it could be that. Could be a. It could be a Langian psychotherapy workshop. Who knows? Yeah. Was that an expression of joy at the thought of that, or horror, or neither?
Well,
Strange, isn't it? Like this is such a rare event compared to Christianity, but all the other stuff, isn't there? This,
Well, Christianity isn't really an event; it's a
Yeah.
story. Isn't
yeah,
it?
I'm saying is that non-duality as a thing, whatever it is incredibly. There's not many people who come along to these meetings, generally, as opposed to all the other things that should go on in the world. It doesn't attract many people, does it?
I think you could almost say it's designed to repel people,
Yeah.
persons. As long as I think I'm a person, what has this got for me? Yeah. It's just a complete mystery why anyone's attracted to this.
Mm.
Yeah, total mystery. It really is. I mean,
Well, they're lucky because this is actually quite a frustrating thing to have a belief in, so to speak. Yes.
well, this has got nothing to do with having a belief in anything.
I know. I'm just.
Yeah. I don't know. Is it whether I couldn't comment on whether it's lucky or unlucky to come to this rather than to go to Roman Catholic Mass. I don't know. Maybe some people do both. I'm sure some people do both.
Were you interested in, because you mentioned your spiritual journey and searching.
Yeah.
Were you interested in non-duality on your path?
So this one? No, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I followed a particular guru for 3 years. I never once heard him speak of non-duality, never once. And I listened to some tapes. Years later, I listened to tapes of him. He was talking about non-duality all the time. I just hadn't heard him. I wasn't interested in that. So,
Are you confused why we're here? Are you confused why we're here?
Am I confused?
Why we come here?
Am I
today?
confused?
Like why we? Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, why would I be confused?
Because you said, how did you phrase it?
Why would anyone be interested in this?
Yes, in a way, but I mean, in a way, I've got my tongue slightly, not totally, but slightly in my cheek when I say this, because in a way, this doesn't have anything for the person. But then the one who comes, who feels themselves to be a person, might not know that to start with, and then by the time they find that out, they're trapped. The tiger of non-duality has them by the neck, and it's too late for them to get away. Just as they're recognising, it hasn't got anything to do, hasn't got anything to offer me, and they try to get away, but their head's already in the tiger's mouth.
Yeah.
You see. So here, for example, I mean, here, I was invited to a meeting with Tony actually when he was still quite young, and he was giving meetings in the house of a friend of mine, which is how I got invited. I went up, wasn't remotely interested in this, didn't understand a word of it, wasn't interested, didn't go back, didn't think about it again. And then 2 or 3 years later I was invited to a meeting again up in Hampstead now. And there was in those days I believed in synchronicity because I was quite superstitious, and there was a synchronicity about it because I was invited to this meeting by 2 different people, completely separate from each other, within 3 days of each other. I thought, the universe must be saying, "Come, Richard, come, we have something for you." So I went along up the road in the Quaker meeting house, and this time one thing was the same, which is I still didn't understand a fecking word of it, but another thing was different, which was that I somehow was completely hooked on it.
what was
And
it?
that had partly to do with the fact that, up there was a jolly group of people who would come out sober from the meeting, go across to the Italian bar over the road and quickly become drunk, and that was great fun. So that was part of it, but it was only part of it. There was something. So, you know, I don't know that anybody could really say why, when they're grabbed by this. We may or may not recognise when we're grabbed by this, but if we are, I don't know if there's anyone who could say why. You know. I mean, you know, you could say, well, I was particularly blessed, or I was particularly cursed. And you could say that for anyone who's grabbed by this. Is this a blessing or a curse? As I've already said, I think it's both. It's a curse to the person. It may be a curse to the person.
Something about
This can ruin your life.
something about the recognition of truth.
Yes, and that's a dodgy word.
I know,
Yeah.
I know, but my experience when truth has turned up, is it's unmistakable. It's like nothing else.
Yeah,
And it's like, and I've always known this.
yes,
It's almost like there's a kind of just a recognition of
yeah,
what's always been
yeah,
the case, as it were.
yeah. However much the mind may be struggling with and saying, I don't understand this, I don't get this.
Yeah.
What's he talking about?
Exactly.
Something deeper than that recognises
Yeah.
the reality
Yeah.
that's being talked about, and that it is the deepest possible level of reality. It
Yeah.
doesn't get deeper than this,
Yeah.
and that compared to this kind of the world religions are just fairy stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've asked this question before, but I like asking it, which is it's almost as though we are kind of hardwired or committed to our own demise in all of this, to our own
In
death.
this, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
In terms of that place of truth, in terms of that recognition, is that there is a, this is the direction of travel here.
Yeah.
You know.
This is my own death,
Absolutely. Yeah.
which I both fear and crave.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Oh God, we're going way. Well, we did start late. We're going way into tea time here, but the phrase just popped into my head. Yeah, this is the end of evolution. This is, yeah. We've evolved to this point just so that we can die, will our own death. This is like willing our own death.
It is, isn't it?
Which
Yeah.
I think is a suitably ponderous and pompous note on which to finish the first half. We usually take do you want a half-hour break? We usually take a half-hour break, but we've kind of overrun. Now, what do you want, 20 minutes, half an hour?
20 minutes?
20 minutes, all right?
Fine.
Yeah? Is that okay? All right, okay, we'll start again at 4 then.